All right, welcome back. So next up, we'll be talking about wilds or wake-initiated lucid dreams and why they're potentially difficult. And he actually titles this part of the chapter, How Wilds Are Wasting Your Time. So I guess, first of all, this isn't going to be the main part of this video, but I'll just get this out the way first, is that in order to have a wake-initiated lucid dream, or from being, from first lying down in bed, being totally consciously aware, following the falling asleep process, getting to stage 1 hypnagogia, and then going from stage 1 directly into REM. And so in order to do that, most of the time, you have to combine this with wake back to bed, right? Because typically we sleep in these 90-minute chunks. In the first 2 sleep cycles, most of the time when you're going to sleep at night, you don't go from stage 1 directly into REM. You go from stage 1 into stage 2, into 3, 4, deep sleep, and then you hit REM, right? So really, most of the time, trying to have a wild when you're initially going to sleep won't work, simply because of that. But his main gripe with wilds is, well, basically comes down to mindfully watching the falling asleep process and some of the potential discomforts, essentially, that can come up in there. Because really, this kind of goes without saying, but in order to have a wild and to fall asleep, you have to stay totally still, right? Which I guess I kind of lucked out on, because a lot of these issues he brings up in here, while they do happen to me occasionally, they definitely don't happen most of the time. And it's very easy for me personally to stay super duper still in bed. Like I think about like float tanks, for example, right? You're in the float tank for I like to do 90 minutes. If you move too much, water's gonna get in your eyes. You start getting some movement in the water, you'll bump into walls and stuff like that. So you have to stay totally still in that thing. And, most of the time I don't fall asleep in there. So it really is just me, staying as still as I possibly can, which again comes easy to me. And when I go to sleep, that is basically what I do. I get in bed, I get set up exactly how I like to fall asleep, and then I just plant my ass there and don't move and watch the falling asleep process. Basically, doing a version of my hypnagogic meditation thing that I talk about a lot. But anyway, no matter which point of focus you choose, you will soon find that being still in itself presents several challenges. Inevitably, any person attempting this method, or basically attempting to mindfully watch the falling asleep process, at some point will have to know how to deal with many less than ideal circumstances. These are to do with the physical sensations, or rather discomforts, involved with staying conscious as your body transitions into sleep. These sorts of discomforts happen naturally as we fall asleep each night. The difference is that we are attempting to remain conscious through them instead of allowing them to go unnoticed as we lose consciousness. If you would like to have a wild, you would do well to prepare yourself for the following. So I'm going to read it, but I'm kind of hesitant to read this because if this is like, say, the first time you're kind of learning about this practice and you hear me say these lists of discomforts, essentially, in my mind, it could raise the chances of you actually experiencing these things. But of course, we'll talk about ways to get through basically all of these. But so first up, he has incessant itching, which can happen occasionally. And to me, if you get itchy, just scratch it, and then, once you move and scratch, it's going to obviously wake you up more than wherever you were at. But then, just start back at square one, stay very still, and repeat the process. Limb pain or discomfort, twitching, shallow or irregular breathing, the urge to repeatedly swallow or yawn, the desire to move or roll over. And, if you have a desire to move or roll over because you're uncomfortable, just move. But hopefully try to get to a position that you can stay comfortable in, and then, again, back at square one, but then again, just start following the falling asleep process and start over. The inability to keep the eyes closed or still, which surprises me, man. I've never had a problem really keeping my eyes closed, but keeping them still can be kind of an issue. And we'll talk more about the eyes here too in a second. He has a whole section on it. Unintentional muscle tension, uncomfortable body temperature, either getting really cold or really hot. That's why you gotta, set up your sleeping position beforehand is very important. Partial numbness and varying degrees of paralysis, which I actually like that part. That's I find it to be pleasant when I do notice that as I'm watching the falling asleep process. Irregular heartbeat, which kind of makes me think of my whole heartbeat meditation thing, which I've shared in several videos. Just go to my channel and look up heartbeat meditation, and I'm sure you'll find it in there. And then auditory, visual, and tactile hallucinations, which for the most part, when those are coming on, that's when you're pretty much hitting stage 1 hypnagogia. So while that can be a problem in kind of you seeing that or hearing something and it waking you up too much, at least by that point, you're like right at that stage 1 area that you want to be. So, to me, that's kind of a good thing, as long as it doesn't shock you awake so much it wakes you out of it completely. This is the fine print that most guides conveniently leave out. Okay, so here he's talking about your eyes, where you really also have to keep your eyes very still. If your eyes are moving around a bunch, you're not going to fall asleep. So you do want your eyes to be still. Something that I've noticed too is that if you are, say you're waiting for these hypnagogic images to come up as you're watching the falling asleep process, if you're looking too much with your physical eyes, that definitely can get uncomfortable. So the way I like to think about it is I just try to keep them relaxed down and center. As long as I know they're in that position, I know they're going to be relaxed. He has a bunch of other great recommendations in here as well, though. So one, he says, is reverse blinking, which I've never tried, but it's a great sounding idea. And if I ever do get uncomfortable eyes, I'll give it a shot. So this is basically exactly what it sounds like. Instead of going like a regular blink from eyes open to open, you go from eyes closed to open to close. And then you want to do this at about the same rate you'd regularly blink, with your eyes open, and then progressively increase the time in between doing that. And that's a good way to relax your eyes if you're feeling uncomfortable. Instead of fighting them and trying to force them still, you can try actively moving them around a bit. You can try massaging your eyes or kind of like warm your hands up and then cup your eyes like that. That can be kind of relaxing as well. And then here, so this is basically how I get through all of these discomforts personally, but going at it from a mindfulness perspective might be more useful for experienced meditators. If you attempt to use the time to experience these sensations with an open mind, they can become a lot less troublesome. And that's basically my main go-to. If I feel uncomfortable, itching's a hard one, but if I just feel uncomfortable, I just kind of sit there and wait, and then eventually, I'll focus on something else, and then that slips from my mind, don't feel uncomfortable anymore, and I can remain, just staying totally still as I'm trying to do. Oh, this is an interesting one too. So I've remarked on several occasions that in order to do this successfully, you need to be prepared to let yourself die. And that is another one of my, I'll normally will combine that with the heartbeat meditation thing too, but I call it like my plain dead technique, where at the very bottom of each exhale, especially if you have earplugs in, it's a lot easier to hear your heartbeat, right? So at the very bottom of your exhale, your heartbeat will slow down a little bit. And then I like to just try and completely turn off and play dead, like in between the heartbeat. It's also a good object of attention you can do just as a sort of a meditative approach is, every inhale, do whatever, let your mind wander. But then as you drop back down, you keep coming back to that play dead state. And that's a nice way to kind of get the body quieted down and, get to sleep quicker. What else we got in here? For me, wilds can be an uncomfortable experience in general, as I could probably tell by all those things you listed off earlier. Very rarely have I wake-induced in a way that I found to be pleasant. So again, I think this might just be me being lucky here, but for me, staying perfectly still and watching the fall asleep process, I guess luckily has just been my main way of falling asleep now for quite a number of years. So, I think if you can get to that point to where it's not bothersome, that's really great, because again, my hypnagogic meditation thing is kind of like my main lucid dreaming practice that I regularly do. Now, I don't do it to have wilds. I just do it for me as a way to fall asleep. But then, of course, if I do wake back to bed at some point, then I can, of course, use the same approach to, get down into stage one, hopefully go directly into REM and have a classic wild. So anyway, kind of a long, rambly video there. We'll leave it at that. And until the next video, keep the lucid dreaming practice legit.